The most dangerous kind of ignorance feels exactly like knowledge. Pittsburgh, 1995. Middle of the day. A man walks into a bank. No mask. No hood. Nothing on his face at all. He looks straight into the security camera, takes the money, walks out. Then he does it again at a second bank. That evening, the footage runs on the local news. Within an hour, somebody recognizes him. Police are at his door before midnight. The robbery is not what made him famous. His reaction did. He was genuinely stunned that the cameras had caught him, because he had covered his face in lemon juice, and he believed, sincerely, all the way down, that lemon juice made you invisible to camera lenses. He had even tested it, took a photo of himself. The photo came out wrong in a way that somehow confirmed the theory instead of setting it on fire. He wasn't joking. He wasn't performing. He had a working model of reality in his head. And inside that model, the plan was airtight. Sit with that for a second. From the outside, it's absurd. From the inside, it was a man acting rationally on the information he had. He didn't fail to think. He failed to see the size of the hole in his thinking. So here's the question. What if the part of your brain you trust the most is the exact part that is least qualified to check itself? Yeah, fun little nightmare. And I'm not talking about the stuff you already know you're bad at. Not singing, not math, not parallel parking while 3 people silently judge you from the sidewalk. I mean the topic where you feel solid, planted, bolted to the floor. The opinion that leaves your mouth with 0 lag. No mental speed bump. No little inner cough that says, wait, do I actually know this? Just clean, instant confidence. Psychology has a name for the glitch hiding inside that feeling. And once you see the wiring, it stops being a joke about idiots on the internet. It starts looking like a trap door under your own feet, waiting for the day you wander into a field you never earned the right to judge. The person you're already thinking of. You know who this video is about. Everybody does. The guy at the barbecue explaining the stock market after 2 clips and 1 podcast. The relative who diagnoses your symptoms in a hallway. The coworker who has never once opened the software but has a 6-point plan for how the whole team should use it. They talk fast. They talk clean. And they never notice the canyon between saying something and knowing it. And it's never just one topic, is it? Directions, diets, politics, your kids' behavior, home repairs, technology, other people's motives. The amazing part is how frictionless it feels to them. No visible hesitation, no visible shame, no urge to check a source like a civilized mammal. That's why the people around them get tired so fast. It's not that they're wrong sometimes. Everyone's wrong sometimes. You, me, the person already typing in the comments. Fine. It's that they're wrong in a tone that leaves no door open. You catch it in small things first. A friend swears they remember exactly how the argument went. They don't. A classmate says they understood the reading, then misstates the entire premise. Someone gives you a shortcut across town, drives you into a dead end, and keeps narrating like a tour guide. The public version is easy to mock. The private version is the interesting one. Inside their head, there's no red flag. No inner voice saying, slow down, you might be improvising. From where they stand, certainty and accuracy feel close enough to be twins. And here's the detail that makes it strange. This person usually isn't lying. Lying takes knowing the truth and choosing something else. This is different, and worse. Nothing is being hidden because there is nothing to hide. The gap is invisible from the inside. Cornell, 1999. A psychologist at Cornell read about the lemon juice case, and instead of laughing and scrolling on, he asked a better question. If a man can be that wrong and that calm about it, what does that say about the rest of us? Not the extreme case, the boring case, the everyday version, quieter, less filmable, running in normal heads on normal Tuesdays. 1999. David Dunning and Justin Kruger run a series of experiments that changed how everyone talks about self-assessment. They tested people on logic, on grammar, and on the ability to judge humor. That last one sounds ridiculous, and it was chosen on purpose. Humor is the one skill nobody thinks of as a skill. Everybody assumes they've got it. So they took a batch of jokes, had professional comedians rate them, Then asked ordinary people to rate the same jokes. The closer you landed to the pros, the better your score. Then came the good part. After each test, people had to estimate how they'd done compared to everyone else. Not what they hoped, not what they wished, what they believed. And the pattern was consistent enough to go global. The people in the bottom quarter weren't off by a hair. Their actual results put them around the 12th percentile. Their guess? Around the 62nd. Read that again, slower. Near the bottom of the board, describing the view from the front row. In detail, with confidence. That's not a rounding error. That's a faceplant wearing sunglasses. And the top performers did the opposite. They rated themselves lower than their scores deserved. Not by as much, and for a completely different reason. They weren't blind to their own ability. They just assumed everyone else found the task as easy as they did. If a question feels simple to you, of course you figure it felt simple to the room. So they underestimated their lead, not their skill. That mismatch between what you can do and what you think you can do became the Dunning-Kruger effect. And yes, it sounds like a tidy label for arrogant people. Too easy. The deeper message is meaner. The same bad judgment that makes someone perform badly also blocks them from seeing that the performance was bad. The original papers never said stupid people are doomed everywhere in life. That's the lazy internet version, and honestly, it needs to sit down. The finding was narrower and nastier. In any area where you lack skill, you usually lack the exact lens you'd need to evaluate that skill honestly. So the problem isn't just ignorance, it's ignorance about the ignorance. The part nobody quotes. And there's one more piece of that experiment almost nobody mentions. Which is a shame, because it might be the most hopeful thing in the whole study. They took some of the low scorers and trained them, not on self-assessment, on the actual skill. Taught them how the reasoning worked, what a strong answer looks like, where the traps are. Then asked them again to rate their earlier performance. And the ratings changed. After learning the skill, they could suddenly see how badly they'd bombed. The training didn't just fix their answers, it handed them the equipment to grade themselves. That's the detail that turns this from a cynical punchline into something you can actually use. The blindness isn't a personality trait. It's a side effect of missing knowledge. Add the knowledge, the vision comes back. Which raises the obvious question. Why is the brain built this stupidly in the first place? Why the trap exists? The answer is not that underqualified people are lazy, careless, or morally defective little goblins. The mechanism is more mechanical than that. To judge whether a sentence is grammatically sound, you need enough grammar to spot the violation. To know whether an argument holds, you need enough logical structure in your head to see the cracks. To tell whether someone explained a topic well, you need a feel for the topic. In other words, the skill and the scorecard are made from the same material. Think about what that means. If you don't speak the language, you can't hear your own accent. If you never learned to sing in tune, the wrong note doesn't sound wrong. It just sounds like singing. Hand someone an instrument with zero training, and they'll play badly for an hour and enjoy every minute of it, because the part of them that would flinch hasn't been installed yet. That's the trap. Not enough expertise means you don't just miss the performance. You lack the internal tools that would reveal you missed it. The part of your mind that should say, hey, you skipped something, is built out of the exact knowledge you don't have. Beautiful design. No notes. Researchers call it a double loss. You miss the task, and you miss the miss. Not because you're malicious. Not because you picked delusion off a menu. Because the system you'd normally audit yourself with is half-built. That's why it's so slippery. No warning light. No sudden sensation whispering. Your confidence is synthetic. From the inside, it just feels like being right. And notice how bizarre that is compared to the rest of your body. Lift something too heavy. Your muscles report the strain instantly. Stay awake too long. Exhaustion shows up whether you invited it or not. Burn your hand. You know in a fraction of a second. The body is one big alarm system. The mind, in this one specific area, has almost nothing. There's no ache when you exceed your knowledge. No fatigue signal when your opinion sprints past your evidence. You can walk 20 miles past the edge of what you actually understand and feel exactly the same as you did at the start. And there's a second twist. As people get good, they see more nuance, more exceptions, more edge cases. Their confidence softens, not because they know less, because they've finally seen enough of the map to realize how much of it is blank. Picture it this way. You're standing in a dark field with a flashlight. Weak beam. You see a small circle of grass and nothing else, and the world looks simple, because darkness doesn't announce itself. Now crank up the beam. The circle grows, but so does the edge where the light stops. The more you light up, the more border you create, which is why raw certainty can be a bad sign. It might not mean strength. It might mean the person hasn't seen enough yet to get nervous. Small circle. No visible border. That one stings a little, doesn't it? Driving. Or the cleanest example ever produced. Once you spot the pattern, it's everywhere. Start with driving. Researchers have asked drivers in multiple countries, across multiple decades, to rate their skill against the average driver. The results are comedy. A huge majority put themselves in the better half. In one well-known American study, close to 9 out of 10 drivers placed themselves above the median, which is mathematically impossible. Half of them are below it. That's what a median is, and it holds even in the group you'd expect to be humbled. Drivers interviewed in hospital, after a crash they caused, still tended to rate themselves above average behind the wheel. That's not stupidity. That's the fact that driving has no scoreboard, no weekly report card. Your only feedback is catastrophe, and catastrophe is rare enough that its absence feels like proof. Every day you get home alive gets filed as evidence of skill, when mostly it's evidence that other people were paying attention. Name that pattern, because it repeats. Wherever feedback is delayed, rare, or fuzzy, confidence grows unchecked. Not because people are liars, because nothing shows up to contradict them. The same bug, different rooms. Now drag it into relationships. There, it's the person who announces they're an incredible listener while chopping off every sentence at the knees. They believe they're present, attentive, emotionally sharp. Everyone around them is living in a completely different documentary. And the feedback loop here is worse than driving, because nobody tells you. The friend who feels unheard doesn't say it. They just talk to you a little less. The partner who feels interrupted doesn't file a report. They shorten their stories. The correction exists. It just arrives as silence. And silence is very easy to read as agreement. That's how somebody spends a decade believing they're the emotionally intelligent one in the room, while quietly being the reason the room goes quiet. Take it to work. There, it's the employee who's never touched a process, but talks like they wrote the manual. Sure, the problem's simple. Sure, the fix is obvious. Sure, everyone else is overcomplicating it. And the longer they talk, the clearer it gets that they've seen about 6% of the machinery. Here's the cruel part about workplaces. Confidence gets rewarded before competence gets measured. Whoever speaks first and speaks clean shapes the meeting. The person who says, "I'd need to check 3 things before I answer," sounds weak in the moment, even when they're the only one in the building who understands the system. Companies promote the sound of certainty, because certainty is faster to evaluate than accuracy. So it doesn't just live in people. It gets institutionalized. Take it online, and the whole thing goes theatrical. A stranger reads a thread, skims an article, watches a short clip, then comments in the voice of a man with 20 years in the field. The confidence is instant. The research is optional. The correction of experts arrives before the understanding does. The internet is a uniquely bad environment for this, because it strips out every natural break at once. In person, you can read a room. The raised eyebrow, the pause, the polite change of subject. Online, that's gone, replaced by numbers. And the numbers don't reward accuracy, they reward decisiveness. The confident wrong answer travels further than the careful right one, because it's shorter, cleaner, and more fun to read. Then there's the shallow archive problem. Any topic on Earth can be summarized in 90 seconds. That summary is genuinely useful. It also produces one very specific illusion. You now own the vocabulary of a field without the structure underneath it. You know the words: expert, threshold, correlation, systemic, baseline. You can stack them into a sentence that sounds like understanding. And your brain is terrible at telling the difference between knowing a topic and recognizing the words that belong to it. Familiarity feels like knowledge. Same texture. Something you've heard 4 times feels true in a way something you've heard once doesn't. Whether or not a single human ever checked it. You see it in parenting advice, fitness culture, finance talk, medicine debates. Every comment section where a sliver of information gets inflated into a full worldview with merch. And it feels so familiar because we all run smaller versions of it. Almost everybody carries at least one area where confidence outruns evidence. Sometimes it's harmless. Sometimes it's expensive. Sometimes it hits the people close to you before it ever hits you. That's the part people resist. Laughing at the overconfident stranger is easy. Asking which of your own opinions has never been properly tested. Suddenly, everybody gets very busy. One honest detour. Before we go further, a detour. You should hear this from me, and not from some smug stranger in the replies. This finding has been argued about, seriously argued about, by people with the training to do it. Statisticians have pointed out that if you measure a group and then ask them to guess their own rank, you get a certain shape in the data almost automatically. Low performers have more room to overestimate than to underestimate. High performers have the opposite. Add ordinary noise in self-assessment, and part of that famous graph shows up even in random numbers. There's also the plain fact that most people, in most domains, rate themselves slightly above average by default. That tendency was in the literature long before this study, and has its own name in psychology. So some of what looks like a shiny new effect is an older, broader habit wearing a costume. Then why is this still worth your time? Because the sharpest version of the claim survives the fight. Even the critics generally accept that self-assessment is noisy, that people are lousy judges of their own ability in unfamiliar territory, and that self-assessment gets more accurate as skill improves. The argument is about how much of the graph is a statistical artifact, not about whether a person can be badly calibrated and perfectly calm about it at the same time. And you can verify the core without a lab. You've watched someone confidently give wrong directions. You've watched a beginner explain your own profession back to you. And you've been that person at least once and found out later. The number can be argued about. The experience can't. Now, turn it inward. So here's the harder question. Where in your life do you feel zero hesitation and have never once had a real reason to test that feeling against someone who actually knows the subject? That's where this video changes shape. Up to now, the subject has been external, the loud relative, the know-it-all colleague, the stranger online who reconstructs an entire event from one screenshot. But the mechanism doesn't care. It doesn't check whether you're polite, educated, thoughtful, or self-aware. Step into a field where your knowledge is thin, and you get the same distortion. Your brain hands you certainty before it hands you calibration. And there's an ugly little wrinkle for people who think of themselves as careful thinkers. Knowing about this effect can make you worse at catching it in yourself, because it gives you a fresh way to feel superior. You start using it as a weapon in arguments. You start diagnosing other people with it. And the whole time, the concept is quietly functioning as one more thing you're overconfident about. If this video has mostly made you think of one specific person in your life, congratulations. That's the reflex, doing its job. So slow down and turn it around. Maybe it's money. Maybe it's raising kids. Maybe it's the skill you use every day at work, and assume you've mastered because nobody's challenged you lately. Maybe it's the belief that you're a better judge of character than you actually are. Maybe it's the confidence with which you repeat something purely because it sounds right. Yeah, that one gets people. That's why this research hits differently once it stops being an abstract model. It forces an audit, not a dramatic confession. No spotlight, no sad piano, just a quiet inventory. Where do I sound most fluent? Where have I mistaken familiarity for mastery? Where do I treat comfort as proof? And there's a fourth question that's even more useful, and it's about time. Which of my opinions hasn't been updated in 10 years? In a field that has changed in 10 years? Because expertise decays. Someone can be genuinely excellent at something, stop paying attention, and keep the confidence long after the knowledge went stale. That version is harder to spot than beginner arrogance because it was earned once. It just never got renewed. Most people hate that kind of question because it takes away the comfort of pointing outward. But it also explains why this thing is so stubborn. From the inside, it never arrives as overconfidence. It arrives as normal. And the trap isn't only that you might be wrong. It's that you get emotionally attached to being right long before the facts are finished getting dressed. There's a physical side to this that's easy to miss. Certainty feels good. It's calm. It closes a loop. Uncertainty is expensive. It keeps options open. It eats attention. So the mind has a mild, constant preference for landing on an answer. And once that answer is in place, new information gets processed as an attack on your comfort instead of an offer of accuracy. Which is also why arguing with deeply certain people drains you so fast. You're not just disagreeing about evidence. You're negotiating with someone whose brake pedal isn't connected to anything. Why the loudest voice is rarely the best one. Which brings us to a social pattern you've definitely noticed and probably never named. In most rooms, the people who know the most aren't the loudest. Experts speak with more caution. Not because they're timid, but because they can see the shape of the topic. They know where the boundaries sit. Which parts are stable, which parts are still fought over, which parts flip the second a new variable walks in and ruins the party. Listen to how a specialist answers a simple question in their own field. It usually starts with a condition. It depends on the case. In most situations, but not all. Strong evidence for the first half. Thinner for the second. That's not dodging. That's the actual shape of the knowledge. Now listen to a beginner answer the same question. Flat. One sentence. No conditions. Nothing to negotiate with. That awareness makes experts sound less dramatic. Sometimes less certain than they really are. Meanwhile, the guy with the shallowest understanding sounds like he swallowed a megaphone. That asymmetry is why public arguments feel so insane. The person with the least context has the least friction speaking. The person with the most context knows exactly how many ways they could be wrong. And audiences don't correct for it. Audiences read hesitation as weakness. So in almost any public forum, the least calibrated voice gets the most airtime. Nobody chose that. The format just quietly selects for it. Very annoying system. Very human. It's also why the most exhausting conversations aren't the most aggressive ones. Sometimes it's just talking to someone with no internal break. No discomfort when they overstate the case. No little check telling them to soften the claim. No instinctive pause before certainty turns into performance. Now, this doesn't mean quiet people are always right and loud people are always wrong. Please don't turn this into another lazy rule. We have enough of those. Plenty of experts are loud. Plenty of confident people earned every ounce of it. And there's a genuinely bad version of doubt too. The person who never commits to anything and calls it humility, when really, they just refuse to be pinned down. It means confidence on its own is a noisy signal. It can point at competence. It can also point at a missing ability to measure competence. By itself, it tells you almost nothing. So what do you look for instead? There's a better test. One mark of real expertise is specificity about uncertainty. Someone who actually understands a topic can tell you where the edges are, what they know, what they suspect, and what they'd need to see before changing their mind. Their certainty isn't flat. It has contours. The blind version does the opposite. Broad, smooth, inflexible. Speaks in absolutes, gets annoyed by detail, treats questions as insults, and challenged, it flips from confidence to defensiveness fast. Because the challenge isn't hitting the opinion, it's hitting the self-image built around it. That's when a normal conversation turns into a hostage situation. Watch what happens at the exact moment of a follow-up question. Cleanest diagnostic there is. Ask someone how they know. Friendly tone. Then just observe. A person with real footing gets more interested. They add detail. They narrow the claim. They tell you which part they're shakier on. A person standing on air changes the subject, raises the volume, or starts talking about your motives instead of your question. Another sign is revision. Strong thinking changes when stronger evidence shows up. Not every opinion flip is wisdom, obviously. Some people have the spine of a wet noodle, but a mind that has never adjusted course on anything isn't necessarily anchored. It might just be underinformed and very well protected from contradiction. Try this one. Ask someone what they used to believe about their own field and no longer do. Real practitioners almost always have an answer, and they usually enjoy telling it. If there's nothing, no correction, no surprise, no reversal in years of practice, that's worth noticing. And one more test. The brutal one. Depth under pressure. Anyone can hold a position for one sentence. Ask 3 questions in a row, each going a level deeper, and it becomes obvious. Real knowledge has floors under it. Borrowed knowledge is a single surface, and question 2 goes straight through. That feeling of certainty is persuasive. That's the danger. It mimics clarity so well that the person inside it mistakes emotional smoothness for truth. The part that actually helps. So no, the goal isn't to become a machine of doubt. Constant self-suspicion has its own distortion. Doubt every judgment, and you don't get wiser. You get easy to paralyze, easy to shove around by whoever happens to sound sure. Also impossible to make dinner plans with. The move is narrower. Build a habit of checking the places where you feel too comfortable. The healthy version is targeted curiosity. Go straight at the spots where certainty feels effortless. Ask what evidence would actually move you. Ask who'd be qualified to challenge your view. Ask whether your confidence comes from experience, from repetition, or from the fact that nobody's forced a correction yet. Want the practical version? Use this. What would have to be true for me to be wrong here? That question breaks the spell certainty casts. It turns a vague opinion into a claim with edges. It reminds you that a view is only as strong as the evidence that survives contact with better evidence. Here's a second one, and it's almost embarrassing how well it works. Explain the thing out loud, all the way through, no skipping, to someone who doesn't already know it. Not a summary, the full mechanism. How does the engine actually turn fuel into motion? How does the immune system actually recognize a threat? How does that policy actually produce the outcome you keep claiming it produces? Out loud. Complete sentences. Most people discover, somewhere around minute 2, that the middle of their explanation is missing. Not the beginning. That part's familiar. Not the conclusion. That part's memorized. The middle. The bit where a real explanation has to do work. The gap was always there. Speaking is just the first thing that makes it visible, because a thought can stay vague inside your skull forever, and a sentence can't. Third habit. Keep a record. Write down a prediction, with a date on it, in a field where you feel confident. Come back later, not to punish yourself, to calibrate. Otherwise, memory quietly edits your old opinions to match whatever turned out true, and you end up convinced you called it all along. Fourth, go find friction from people who genuinely know more than you. Not people who agree, not people who flatter you. People who can point straight at the weak spot without turning it into a personality war. And when that correction lands, watch what happens in your body first. There's usually a small flare of heat, a defensive sentence forming before the criticism even finishes. That flare isn't proof the other person is wrong. It's a flag on something you're attached to. The attachment is the signal. Follow it. One more move, and it costs nothing. Say the words, "I don't know," out loud. On purpose. At least sometimes. People avoid it because they expect to lose status. In practice, the opposite happens. In a room full of people performing certainty, the one person who admits a limit becomes the one whose other statements are worth trusting. Uncomfortable, yes. Also, the fastest route out of the blind zone. Because the real danger of this effect isn't that it makes people stupid. It's that it makes them feel complete while they're still missing the basics. And if that sounds unpleasant, good. It should. The whole point is to catch the pattern before it hardens into identity. That's the end game here. An opinion is easy to change. An identity isn't. Once being right about something becomes part of who you are, every piece of contrary evidence stops being information and becomes an insult. And the cost of updating goes up every single year you don't. One small correction beats 100 hours of unchallenged confidence, which is why the next moment matters more than the last one. One last thing, said plainly, because this whole subject can tip into cynicism if you let it. The point is not that nobody knows anything. Expertise is real. Some people genuinely do know more, and they're worth listening to. And the fact that confidence can be fake doesn't make all confidence fake. That conclusion is the same error in a different coat. Deciding every expert is a fraud is itself a judgment made without the knowledge required to make it. The point is narrower. Confidence is not evidence. It's a feeling produced inside one's skull. It lines up with knowledge only sometimes, and least reliably exactly where you're weakest. Nobody's asking you to stop trusting yourself. Just stop treating the sensation of certainty like it's a measurement. And if a memory surfaced while you were watching this, keep it. The time you were absolutely sure and later found out you had it completely backwards. The moment certainty outran your understanding. That's not a humiliating memory. It's a useful one. Most people never see the gap while they're standing inside it. They only see it afterward, once the story has already changed shape. So if you've got one, drop it in the comments in one line. Not as a confession, as a signal to everybody else reading that this blind spot has visited more than one head in the room. And if this made you pause, even for a second, that pause is worth a like. It helps the next person, who is right now mid-argument, completely convinced they're the exception. The unsettling truth is simple. Psychology never found that ignorance is just about intelligence. It found something harder to swallow. Sometimes the most dangerous ignorance is the kind that feels exactly like knowledge. Not doubt, not confusion, not the feeling of guessing. It feels like clarity, like the calm that shows up when a question is finally settled. That's what makes it so hard to catch. And that's why it survives in smart, careful, well-meaning people for decades. The man with the lemon juice on his face wasn't confused when he walked into that bank. He was certain. That was the whole problem. So next time you feel that rush of total certainty, about a stranger, about a subject, about yourself, stop for 1 second and ask the question this all started with. What if this is the very thing I understand least?